Picking out multi-species cover crop blends can seem like an absolutely daunting task at first. Have no fear though, today we are going to walk through exactly how we pick out our multi-species cover crop blends here on JTAC Farms. I'm Tyler Tobald. Welcome back. Today finds us out in our multi-species cover crop, planted into our wheat stubble. Thanks to a few well-timed rains here lately, doesn't look half bad. I'm pretty happy with it. I get a good bit of good faith questions every time I talk about multi-species cover crops. One of those first questions is, how do we know what to pick for our multi-species blends? Good question. Second one is, can I help them pick out a blend for their multi-species cover crop? Now, right out of the gate here, I want to get this out of the way and addressed first of all. A little asterisk up here. I am not an expert on every cover crop for every area. I know it works great for my area. One of the blessings and the curses of regenerative agriculture and cover crops is that they can be tailor-made to work everywhere, but they require you to figure out how they work for your operation, for your environment, and most importantly, the purpose that you want to plant them. That is honestly one of the most important things. What is the purpose for your cover crop? That will tell you a lot about what you want to plant. As far as our purpose goes, we've got a few different goals. First off, being grazing. Supplemental grazing for cattle, stockpile grazing for cattle, whatever you want to call it. This is where the majority of our return on investment comes from. All that extra cow chow, all that extra grazing time for our cows means that much less feeding that we have to deal with, that much less silage we have to plant. For us, this is one of our big priorities. Second on this list is erosion control. Here in our nice little slice of heaven in north central Kansas, we are in highly erodible ground. We have terraces and waterways galore. We need living roots in the ground to hold that soil together. And with that increases water infiltration, which means more water getting into the soil instead of just skating across it and running off. Now, tied for third and fourth place for us is nutrient cycling and nitrogen fixation. They're pretty much the same level of importance to us, but they're two different things. A lot of these different cover crops, they will pull nutrients from deeper in the profile. Your radishes, some of your deeper taprooted stuff, things like that will pull nutrients from deeper in your profile and pull them up closer to the surface. They'll be in the tissues of the plant. The cows will eat that plant, digest everything through the rumen, and deposit it in a nice patty-sized area on the ground to be soaked back in that top layer of soil for your next cash crop to use. As far as nitrogen goes, by utilizing legumes like chickpeas, mung beans, winter peas, sun hemp, not that hemp, a different type. We are able to, since they're inoculated, they will put nodules on their roots. We are able to make some of our own nitrogen and roll over organic nitrogen credits that accumulate year after year. Now, last but certainly not least on this list is weed suppression. Fewer words strike fear into a crop farmer's heart like herbicide-resistant weeds. Looking at you, Palmer amaranth, or pigweed, or you, mare's tail, or horsewhip, whatever you want to call it. Those things are the bane of our existence. Now, if I can naturally suppress those with things like triticale, rye, oats with their allelopathic properties that hinder the germination of those super duper small seeded things like that, or plant enough population of things growing that it adds so much competition. Mare's tail and pigweeds, they don't like competition. If you get them covered up they have a hard time hanging with it. They like wide open spaces with excess nitrogen and compaction. If you rid them of that, they have a hard time competing with everything else. Am I saying I'm 100% out here? No. But the more I naturally suppress, the less I'm going to have to fight next year chemically. And that's the less I have to fight, the less I'm going to have to worry about getting past that chemical application and having more herbicide resistant weeds.
You just lost your own game. You're outgunned and outmanned.
Now, again, before we go any further, keep in mind that these are our goals for our operation. Your goals may be a little different. Before you go to try to figure out what you want to plant, figure out why you want to plant it first. The why will help direct you towards the what. Now that we've got the why figured out, let's move on to the what. We look for a balanced blend when we look at our multi-species cover crops. You know, kind of when we were kids, when the cereal commercials would say an important part of a balanced breakfast. Well, balance is also important when you're picking out a cover crop. And we want to balance everything between these four things: grasses, brassicas, legumes, and broadleaves. These are the four families that we're going to be pulling different species from. Now, it's important to keep in mind that balance is not solely those four categories that I was telling you about earlier. There's two more categories that encompass all four of these things: warm season and cool season. For us, we strive to balance those as well. Now, we put the majority of our species in here are warm season. We want that warm season growth potential. You know, it's August here in Kansas. It's definitely warm. We've got some moisture. We've got the heat. Let's get some growth. Let's get some biomass. Let's get some of that tonnage that we need for our stockpile grazing. We get that really fast, heavy growth of that stuff. But then we also have a section of this stuff that is cool season. We want it to survive over the winter. Our winter peas, our beardless triticale, you know, a couple of those things. They will regrow next year in the spring. Keep that living root in the ground as much as possible, just to help keep everything tied together and help keep some weeds at bay before we plant our spring planted fall crops. Also, part of that what includes diversity. And no, I'm not talking about the hiring buzzword. I'm talking about biodiversity. Fun fact about me, I'm the kind of the guy that loves having contingency plans in place. And behind that contingency plan is usually another contingency plan, followed up by probably another one, and by, at the end of that line, a break glass in case of emergency plan.
There's a plan in everything, kid. And I love it when a plan comes together.
Just how I roll. I take that same type of thinking and I also apply it to our cover crop when I'm picking out how many species I put in it. This particular multi-species cover crop blend has 24 different species in it. Now, biodiversity is great. I love seeing that. And it's always fun to see people's reaction when I tell them we have 20 plus different things in here. But it's not just that. If something in here, one of these species falls flat on its face, and you've only got 4, that's a quarter of your species gone. You're going to have a lot of gaps, and that's going to be a lot of trouble for those other 3 to fill that in. Last year, sainfoin did not do well. It could not handle the terrible, terrible heat dome events that settled over our state.
It's so damn hot. Milk was a bad choice.
Other species were able to fill that gap and keep the ground covered. Our cucurbit blends was a great one that did that. Buckwheat last year for us, the heat dome event triggered it to start flowering, and it flowered, and then it was done early, way early. Those spots that were left open by that buckwheat terminating itself early were filled in by other species. Now, you probably had this thought run through your head. 24 species? My God, that's got to cost an astronomical amount of money per acre for that. Well, you'd be forgiven for thinking that, because once upon a time, I used to think that. And you'd be wrong. Here's my invoice this year. This is what we planted. Now, that dollars per acre, take about $1.80-ish off of that. We did a pay now discount. Always worth doing if you can.
Dollar bills, y'all.
That's what it cost us per acre for this. Now, you see, there's only 22 things on this list. I added 2 things I had here on the farm. Had some Milo left over and had some soybeans left over that we just kind of blended in as we loaded it up in the air seeder. Hi, post-production Tyler here. Apparently, I can't count, or read for that matter. You probably noticed there's only 21 species on that list, which gives me a grand total of 23. That's my bad. Moving on. Let's compare my fancy blend to some premixes. There's one, there's another, there's another, there's another. You get the point. Same, if not more expensive for those. Now let's hit the brakes on this and go back again, where I've said earlier that different areas, different needs require the use of different things in your cover crops. For us, this, seemingly opulent blend works great. For one of my neighbors, he's got a 4-way blend. It's super duper cheap. It's just some random stuff. Works great for him. He doesn't have cattle. He doesn't want cattle out on it. Totally fine. Got another neighbor. Did an 8-way blend. Loved it. Probably going to stick with that for the foreseeable future. There's nothing wrong with that. You also need to work within your environmental context as well. There are places up north that don't want any cover crop stuff surviving past that first freeze. They want some stuff laying on the surface to help slow down the rain, things like that. But they don't want stuff growing because that brings in different pests, aggravates vole issues or slug problems. Things that I don't have to deal with down here in this arid part of the country. Thank God, because slugs and voles just don't sound like a good time to me. But again, work within your context. Know the why. What is your purpose? And that will point you towards what you want to get started with. But most of all, know that you are going to make a mistake. You're going to mess up. There's going to be an issue with your cover crop that is going to cause some people to probably point and laugh at it. That says more about them than it does you. Embrace it. I have. My list of failures is far bigger than my list of successes. But I've learned more from any one singular failure than I have from all of my successes put together. Start small. You don't have to put your entire farm to cover crop right now. Find 8 acres. Start there. Be intentional. Be aggressive. Figure out what works for you. It's not going to be, I'm going to plant this and figure it out with 1 year. If you do that, that is fantastic. Good for you. It may take you 4 or 5 different seasons to try to figure out what works for you. There's nothing wrong with that. Be intentional, start small, and go for it. Try something. You never know until you try. And with that, here endeth the lesson. If you've made it this far in the video, please know that I appreciate it. Easiest way to help out my channel is to, like the video, share it with a friend, subscribe, hit that little bell icon, drop a comment down in the comment section. Tell me about your favorite cover crop or your favorite cover crop blend, what you like to use your cover crops for. Or if you don't use cover crops and think I'm just half-baked and crazy, you can tell me that too. It's nothing I haven't heard before. Hope to see you back next time. As always, thanks for stopping by.